Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. In the Torah, we can learn as much from the words that are written as we can from the words that are not written, from the feelings and emotions and thoughts that are expressed by our leaders and by God, and those that are in the margins and left blank. And one of the things in the Torah that has always flummoxed me is the silence, the quiet, after the deaths of Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron. They offer a strange fire to God, and there is absolute silence. The text says, Vayidom Aharon, Aaron was silent. I imagine it to be the kind of silence where you could hear a pin drop, a mouse sneeze, just absolute silence. And the question that I ask at a moment like that is, where was the outrage? Where was the grief? Where was the sadness? We have seen our leaders express outrage before. Moses gets so angry he hits the rock. Abraham is so mad at what's happening at Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah, that he negotiates with God to not destroy the city. We know that our leaders can use their voice. Why is there silence, and why is there not communal outrage at the death of Nadav and Avihu? Since that time, I believe that we have swung the pendulum as a people, perhaps all the way to the other side, where we have been carved out and defined as people who look to demonstrate our empathy at all times. In my estimation, there is no stronger story that tells that depiction of the empathy of the Jewish people than when the Israelites crossed the Sea of Reeds, the Egyptians get swallowed up in the water, and the Israelites are dancing and celebrating, and they call down to God and they say, God, join us in this celebration. And God says, my creations have just been destroyed, referring to the Egyptians. It is no time for me to celebrate. And since that text has become really a cornerstone of the Jewish people, that we are a people that are supposed to be empathetic, that when any person dies, when there is tragedy that falls upon any living creature, on our environment, that is part of what God's gift is to us, then we have a responsibility to be disposed to be empathetic to it, to pour our hearts out, to be sad, and to try and change that. And for much of the time, that is a posture that makes me proud of my tradition. It makes me proud of my religion. When I see people who are hungry or suffering or crimes against things that God have created, whether it be a rainforest, whether it be climate change, whether it be animals in the Amazon, or whether it be other humans killing other humans, I am proud that I am part of a religion that has shaped me to respond to those moments with empathy. That is what my religion calls for. At the same time, I'm starting to wonder, in a very serious manner, if two things are happening that are wildly dangerous. One, have we made that notion of empathy our only defining characteristic, to the point where other characteristics of who we are and what we are about have been pushed to the side and not focused upon? And the second piece is, what determines which group is to receive empathy? If the Indians and the Pakistanis are engaged in a battle of which, as I stand here before all of you today, I can proudly announce I know nothing about. I don't know about their history. I don't know about their traditions. I don't know about the long-standing feuds between them. So how outrageous would it be for me to stand on one side versus the other? But if I were to say, I am with the Indians on this issue, of which I know very little about, why am I not lamenting the death of a Pakistani? And of course, vice versa. I believe that like many things we do in religion, in work, and in life, that sometimes we swing that pendulum or we step to that side just a little too much. And I think we're starting to do harm to that core characteristic of who we are as a Jewish people. Let me be abundantly clear. I don't ever want to forsake the notion that we as a people are empathetic and that we have a responsibility to respond with empathy to things that deserve it. But life, all things in life, are about choices. And how we respond in those moments are problematic. I want to share a couple of examples with all of you about how this same notion has risen to the forefront and created factions in our Jewish world that is bordering on silliness, and then how it's grown outside of our Jewish world into a place of serious danger. When you're in rabbinical school at either the Jewish Theological Seminary or Hebrew Union College, which are the primary Reform and conservative rabbinical schools, one of the pinnacles of graduation as you prepare in your final year is something called your senior sermon. Everyone has to do it. And what happened when I was a senior 25 years ago is that the year before our senior year, everyone is assigned a particular Shabbat date. You pull it out of a hat, you're there when they do it, and you are the rabbi of the seminary synagogue that Shabbat. You have to give the sermon, and you decide all the honors that are going to be given, who's going to read the Haftorah. It's like another bar or bat mitzvah all over again. The only difference is you are giving the sermon. So after 5 years of rabbinical school, this is your moment to inspire. And often what we speak about are the things that have shaped what we hope our rabbinate to be and our rabbinical education to be. The Reform movement does this, the conservative movement does this, and we do this so each week there is a senior sermon. The only change that's happened in the past 25 years since from the time that I've graduated is that now the senior sermons have moved to Wednesday so that more faculty can join when many of them didn't come on Shabbat. The story I'm about to tell you is incredibly painful for me. It happened at the Hebrew Union College, the HUC campus, and it happened this past year. A young woman who was graduating the rabbinical school was giving her senior sermon. And she was talking about a particular topic, and as is appropriate this time of year, she incorporated the thought of Israel. And she said the sentence, "as a proud Zionist." And then she continued on her sermon. 4 words, "as a proud Zionist." And a more than meaningful portion of her classmates, some in her same grade and some in other grades, and perhaps some members of the community at HUC that gathered, were aghast, were upset, were disappointed, and were turned off that someone would proclaim loudly that they are proud Zionist. And when she finished, this is rabbinical school, ladies and gentlemen, when she finished her sermon, later at the collation that most of these people have, some of her friends lovingly cornered her and said, "How could you say that, knowing all of the death and pain and atrocity that has befallen the Palestinian people?" She was stymied. She was hurt. She was blindsided. What was she going to say? What about the 1,400 people who were murdered on October 7th? What about the 251 hostages held against their will? What about the torture and death of innocent Jewish red-headed kids that were taken from their cribs? Is that what we're going to get into every time, a tit-for-tat game with people about whose pain is more potent, or what numbers we put on the scale that really justifies what suffering is? It reminds me of when I was a kid, and I would say to my mother or my father, "This is so terrible because X and Y happened to me." And my parents, in their brilliant parenting, would say, "Oh, you think that's terrible? What about person so-and-so who's dealing with this issue? That's much worse than what you have." And there was a part of what they would say that was incredibly flip and not well advised these days, and there was a part that was quite obvious, because it is all relative. So I take that story of that HUC graduate from this year, and I put it in the parking lot with all of you for a minute. This past week marked Israel's Independence Day. And part of the genius of Israel is that the day preceding Israel's Independence Day is the memorial day for Israel's fallen. It's a real juxtaposition. You go from your lowest lows to your highest highs. And everyone in Israel has someone who they know and they love who lost their life defending the land. And then everyone can take part in the celebration of their independence. And this year, my alma mater, the Jewish Theological Seminary, decided that they were going to host a memorial day for the fallen Israeli soldiers and to commemorate the Nakba. For those of you who are unaware, the Nakba is the Arabic word which means the great catastrophe. And it is a word that refers to the declaration of the state of Israel. May 14th, 1948 was called the Nakba Day because for the Palestinians, that was a day of terrible things when their identity, peoplehood, and land was taken from them. A, that's false, and B, our happiest day is inherently their saddest day. And the Jewish Theological Seminary decided that for their commemoration of the fallen of Israel, it should incorporate all of the sadness of those who died during the Nakba. As a graduate and a supporter, I was incensed. I was incensed because that is a day where we recognize the more than 25,000 souls that were sacrificed so that we can have a homeland of Israel. They died on battlefields, and they died in buses and cafes, some the victims of terror, others the victims of warfare, for us to have a homeland. And out of 365 days in a year, that's a day for memory, in my estimation. And it's a day for our memory. But there are others who believe that in shaping the future of the Jewish world, that we must lead with empathy. And if we have a day for our memory and we don't dedicate at that same time equal empathy and memory for those in the Nakba, well then what have we become as a people? And we have become so bogged down, so harried with these details of equality and equanimity that we lose a sense of particularism and of legitimate pain and celebration, for that matter. I remember when the late Senator and presidential hopeful John McCain died. It was at a time when our country was very, very divided. Not that much has changed since then. And we all live in some kind of echo chamber. We all live in a bubble with people who share very similar views. And when I got on social media, which is one of the main vehicles, the main channels of communication, I was listening to all of my colleagues do something that I was understanding of but bothered by. And all of my colleagues were writing memorials to John McCain, and they all started with the exact same preamble. Although my politics are different than Senator McCain's, I respect his love of country, I respect his service, I respect that he was a POW, I respect that he ran for office, I respect that all these beautiful accolades about who he was, but they felt that they couldn't share them in the public arena unless they led with, "Don't paint me as a Republican, that could be dangerous." And I imagine that had or if and when someone of a similar caliber in the Democratic Party dies, we might hear the same from another group. Don't paint me that way. Let me start off by saying, though I disagree with this politics, though I disagree with the way she did X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C. And I ask the question to all of you, why have we become so mired in these notions of being afraid to be put into these categories? Why are we afraid to say, I'm sad John McCain died. I'm sad that we lost a hero of America, a POW, a veteran, a fantastic senator, and a former presidential candidate who clearly loved his family and he loved this country. Why are we afraid to say that? Because it's the same thing that makes us afraid to say that makes me afraid at times for the kickback I'm going to get in one direction or another, whether it's a kiddish or an email, that laments the killings of innocent Israelis without taking a moment of pause for the innocent Palestinians. It's the same thing that's making people say, we're going to have a day to commemorate the 25,000 that were murdered so that we can have a homeland, but we can't do that unless we also make some time for all of those Palestinians because they're victims too. And hey, once we're doing it for the Palestinians, why don't we do it for Hezbollah? And maybe we should do it for the Houthis as well. Let's stop there. How about those Al-Qaeda people we took out a few weeks ago in Syria? Should we pause for them? Some of them are mothers and fathers. Some of them might have been innocent bystanders. Where does it end? And when does it end? Have we become so singularly focused on this notion of leading with empathy that we have absolutely lost the plot of who we are as a people and what our chosenness means? And when we choose a side of empathy, what makes us choose that side and forsake the other? And if you ever want to see the stupidity of that demonstration, you needn't look farther than the Upper West Side of Manhattan this week, where at Columbia University, a group of about 100 hoodlums broke into a study hall at Butler Library, masked because while they are passionate and hot against the war in Gaza, they are very protective and worrisome when it comes to COVID. And they disrupted the library, those studying, and then they vandalized the books and the bookcases, and they refused to identify themselves. They pulled the fire alarm, which was part of the technique that they were trained by so that they could all run out and have protection without having to identify who they are, so it allows them to do this again. Thankfully, the security that wasn't injured, they knew that they weren't going to allow anyone escape who didn't identify themselves. And after doing this, they found that 12 of these people who were part of this group, and only about half to two-thirds were actually connected with any connective tissue whatsoever to the school. One was a faculty member, one worked at the school, about 12 were from Barnard, the rest were from outside places, 44 were connected to the school, some were grad students. One was even that grad student who insisted that they receive food and humanitarian aid because they're holding themselves up last year, and they deserve to be on the meal plan, if you recalled that. Here's my question to those passionate proponents of peace and love and the non-killing of babies. Did they protest the bomb, the ballistic missile that was sent with the target of Ben Gurion Airport that missed by basically 100 yards, that could have killed children and mothers and grandparents all going on trips and vacations for work and for pleasure? Or are we supposed to fall on the sword and be embarrassed that we have missile defense and protection? That should be a shame for us, even though at that moment it didn't work. Even though it disrupted travel for thousands upon thousands of people, yours truly included. We were supposed to leave tonight on a synagogue mission to Israel. We're not going. Big deal. There were a bunch of people who were going on flights like ours who were celebrating their kids' or grandkids' bris, a bar mitzvah, a graduation, and they can't. I'm just curious, with all that's happening in Yemen, with the Houthis that don't have two nickels to rub together to feed their flock, but seem to have enough fuel to continue to rearm ballistic missiles, is there a demonstration happening at Barnard or Columbia? Are they knocking down the doors of any study halls? Are they lamenting the death of those people being starved by their own and misappropriating funds to hurt others? I'm not trying to call out just the blatant hypocrisy and anti-Semitism that's happening. What I'm really trying to call out here is, why is it that we can be an empathetic people to one group and ignore the empathy of another? When my mother died, I started going to Avat Torah congregation every morning to say Kaddish. We have morning minyan at our synagogue only on Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. And we have evening minyan every day. But I wanted to say Kaddish as many times a day as I could, so I started going there. And when you finish davening there are people who stand at the doorway who are less blessed, and they ask for tzedakah. And sometimes there's 3 or 4 of them. And inevitably, I would give them whatever singles I had on me. That was it. I didn't give out 5s or 10s or 20s because you could become very poor in the course of a week in doing so. And I felt like a single was appropriate. But when there were 4 people standing there and I had 2 singles with me, I didn't know what to do. How do I pick which one deserves my tzedakah? And that same question is what I would ask you of, how do we pick which group deserves our empathy? How do we choose which group deserves a demonstration of an illegal or an appropriate protest? Whether it be at Brooklyn College, Barnard, Columbia, NYU, Wash U, UCLA, or anywhere else in the world. How do we determine which group deserves our empathy? And I would take it a step further. If we become a people that are so focused on the empathy of others that we forsake our own, then we failed. We failed as a people. No one put this better in my estimation than Danny Gordis. Danny Gordis said, if we as a Zionist and democratic people believe that we can create a homeland in Israel where everyone is created equally and everyone can have an equal share, Palestinians, Arabs, Jews, and democracy makes it so that the next prime minister is indeed a Palestinian and the majority become Palestinian, he said that is the victory of democracy and it is the failure of Zionism. And I'm not ready to take that deal. And occasionally in life, we have to start with our own. I don't have enough fingers and toes of people who come to me to talk about challenges they have in their personal life. And I say to them, how's business? Oh, business is rocking, Rabbi. I'm working hard. I'm making a lot of money. How are your parents? Parents, thank God, they're doing well. They're spending half the year in Florida. They're good. So what's the problem? Well, the problem's at home. Problems with my kids, problems with my spouse. And I say to them, if you spent half as much time as you do in your business towards your family, I don't think you'd be talking to me right now. And I wish this was a singular problem. But all of us know, especially those of a particular color of hair on our head, that as we grow and mature, if we don't take care of our home, it won't take care of us. And if we're only thinking about those outside factors and not others, well, then we fail. The Torah tells us this week in the Parsha, Kedoshim to you, we should be holy. It also has an incredibly troubling verse in the Parsha. It says that a man should not lie with a man the way that a man traditionally lies with a woman, kitoevahi, because that is an abomination. And that is the proof text that people of many religions and stripes that are Abrahamic at its core use against homosexuality. And the truth is, if you are a literalist and you focus on the words and the text of the Torah, it does say in Leviticus 18 that homosexuality is an abomination. It's hard to deny that. It's not what I believe personally, but that's what the Torah says. And how many people have I seen use that line in the Torah as a cudgel, as a weapon? And meanwhile, they are blind, oblivious, forgetting that in the very next chapter of the very same portion that they're quoting, it says the words that all of you will know. Ahavta l'recha kamocha. You should love your neighbor as you love yourself. That we should never put a stumbling block in front of the blind. That we shouldn't curse the deaf. That all of these core things about how we treat others is as important as that one law that we seem to focus on. But there's silence when talking about those values, just like the silence after the death of Nadav and Avihu. Where is that outrage? Where is that screaming, saying, Ahavta l'recha kamocha, love our neighbors as we love ourselves? When I think about who I am and what I am as a Jew, I am insanely proud that I am part of a tribe, born into a tribe that has made me empathetic, that has fashioned me as someone that has a heart that can bleed when I see someone else hurt. I'm proud to wear a Jewish star that says that and feels that. But I don't want that to be my only defining characteristic. And I surely don't want that to be a characteristic that has empathy for the other at the cause of pain for myself, which simply means that if I can't bleed first for my own tribe, for my own family, for my own people, for my own land, for my own country, then I don't deserve to bleed and to cry for the other. That those first tears and that first level of empathy has to be shared and demonstrated at first for our own. And then at second, what has to happen is we need to figure out why we're choosing to have the empathy. If you want to march for those who died in India and Pakistan, then march for both of them. But to pick one without knowing the data is what will lead to our civil destruction and continued forms of masquerading racism. In my estimation, our society needs two things. We need surgeons in the place of butchers, and we need nuance in the place of dogma. We need to be like our movement was shaped, to find that center line, to lead with empathy, but also be driven by common sense and a sense of connectivity to our people, to our tribe, to our homeland. For if we don't, I'm afraid there'll be no one left to cry and mourn and protest for us. Shabbat shalom, everyone.